and I tied like 100 balloons to my back, and I went to like the bars, and you could just see my balloons like go through the crowd. So I'm pretty proud of that one. So
I wish it was the same year I was Carl, because I was the old man and I had
Annie, we can still do that.
I love that movie. Oh my God.
I'll see you
I was like,
next time.
literally the same thing, in a full tweed suit with
Did you have balloons?
Yeah, a cane and
yeah.
3 balloons. Not as many though. I would have seen you a mile away.
It's awesome.
Well, we're glad you're here with us.
Rebecca?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rebecca. This is my first time.
I think you're on mute.
Oh. I clicked on.
Oh,
Can
you're
you
good.
hear me now?
You're good now. Yeah.
Okay. This is my first time at City Open. I've been hearing about it for like a year or 2 years from Genevieve. We used to work together. I am currently an architect nowhere, but it finally means that I've gotten organized to show up to one of these. And my favorite Halloween costume, I found this like neon green dress that had a hole shaped like an eye, and I was Mike Wazowski, and I like drew of people on my stomach, and that was pretty fun.
Awesome. Also, per my roll call, I don't see anyone, but if you haven't gone and you're here,
Anthena,
meet yourself.
Hi.
Yes. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Anthena Gore. I work at Elevate Energy as a project coordinator. I was part of the first City Open, so that's how I heard about it, of course, from Paola and Elle. And most memorable Halloween costume. I don't think I really have a most memorable Halloween costume because I've always been too much of an adult about Halloween, so I didn't really dress up. But one time we did have adult trick-or-treating, and we just all gave each other like those mini bottles. So that was a really good year.
that's awesome.
Okay. So thank you everyone for being here. I forgot to say also I'm a designer and I work at SNH. So so I haven't met you, but that's kind of cool. We work at the same firm. We are, as we mentioned in the beginning, we're still in for Elle, who's on maternity leave, and Paola, who has a previous engagement tonight. And Annie, if you want to share the agenda or pull the agenda up.
Yes.
We want to just go over a couple of, usually at the beginning of these City Open workshops, kind of go through a list of what's happening and see if there's anything, any new events that anyone wants to add. We can share this link again in the chat. I can do that. But this is an open document and feel free to add anything. And then same goes, the document is linked through the website. I mean, we can go to the website and just to show what that looks like. But this season, there's been this really cool partnership with Metropolitan Planning Council, working on tools of engagement and kind of what that looks like in different mediums, in person, virtual, and then kind of a hybrid of that, which was these DIY kits. And this session, I think the objective is kind of, it's part one of a 2-part documentation session. So we want to capture information, have some share outs about the various sessions, and get input as well about kind of next steps. I think there's also a meeting coming up, so we'll hit more on that when we get to that slide. But right here, we're on the website. This is the page for.
Sorry.
Here we go. Let's see.
All right. Can you see it?
We're cool. That was fine.
You're on your toes.
Taking you guys on a very fast ride right now. So yeah, this is website. I think probably a lot of you have seen it. If not, it's worth checking out. And there's the link to the community events, a little bit of an overview there. And then if you go up to, I think there's a link at the very top of, like in the homepage, to the calendar of City Open, or the various sessions. Let's say past, you've got your past workshops. Oh. Yeah, so we've got our calendar of events. But all that's to say that it's one of the super cool things about City Open, is one of the very many, is that it's so open source and you can just get anything that you want. You can look up notes from past workshops and past meetings. And the goal is to keep the documentation kind of active and accessible. So that's part of what these next couple of sessions are going to be about, kind of collecting that and recording it and archiving it and making it so that if someone else were to want to do something similar, or when you go to do another season, you can go back and all the information is accessible and for anyone. So super appreciate everyone's help in making this happen, and in advance for the next couple of days or workshops around this. But then I guess if we go back to the agenda, announcements. So we don't have to go over the time. I feel like that's redundant, but so City Open was inspired by Shy Hack Night, partnering with Metropolitan Planning Council this season. Follow us on social media if you don't. And then looks like there is a restorative design conference, which is out of date, unless that already happened, right? I mean, I know October 2nd already happened, but looks like those are kind of old. So maybe we should update these. Does anyone have any announcements? Oh, let me share the link to this.
Everybody vote.
Yeah, I was going to say voting.
Oh.
If you haven't voted by mail, you can early vote.
That's a really important one. Okay.
So make sure to do that. What else? That's kind of it.
Ooh, we should have done a question about that for everyone in the hot seat. Say, have you voted? Vote. Okay, that's a good one.
I have one.
Any other thing?
Yeah. So on November 19th, I'm an emerging professional co-chair with Illinois ASLA, and we're going to be talking to the Center for Neighborhood Technology about some of their Rain Ready program and some of their other water and green infrastructure projects. You don't have to be in ASLA to attend. It's just a attend by donation type of thing. So if you're interested, on November 19th, we'll be talking to them.
Maddie, can you add that to the?
Yeah, I'll put all that. I don't think there's a link or anything yet, but I will add that information once I get it.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else?
This is Lisa. I'm putting in the chat box a link to a talk we have coming up in November on preserving cultural heritage in urban neighborhoods with speakers from San Antonio to tell us about programs that have been successful there, especially in light of a lot of the controversy going on right now in Pilsen, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, with a historic district there that is about to fail. So this is just going to be an interesting talk about San Antonio and how their planning efforts have been different than what's been done so far here in Chicago. Maybe of interest.
That's great.
This is not a particular event necessarily, but I've been volunteering a little bit of time with the Leverage, which I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but they are a mutual aid group that have set up refrigerators across the city that are run and maintained by volunteers and donors, and they're always looking for distributors. So if you guys have a car or availability to help maintain a fridge, it takes like 15 minutes of your time and you sign up whenever you want. You just basically go in and check in on a fridge and sanitize the handles. But I think at the moment they're specifically looking for more help with distributing, pick up food and then bring them to the fridges across the city. I can drop that info in the doc.
Great. Thanks, Louisa.
That's really cool. Okay. Their announcements. We can.
Should I just flip to the deck?
It's kind of going wild. I feel like that usually happens when a bunch of people try to use Google and share it on Zoom. Okay. So let me skip to, there we go. So this is where we are right now in this season, I believe. Somebody please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, because I have not attended all of these workshops. But basically we planned what we were going to do, and then we did most of what we were going to do, and there's a couple more sessions about in the doing. And then, so we're part 2, and then part 3, we're kind of in part 3, are we not? Okay, here we go.
Yeah, sorry.
We're here, we're at the synthesis point. Have left documents, and then looks we have some sort of social gathering or non-gathering, virtual gathering. But it's been a fast season and a pretty amount, and it's just been really cool. If we want to maybe start with the block exercise engagement methods, a couple of people on that queuing, maybe Maddie? Remote DIY, should we start with remote DIY?
I think
these
the
are
next
the 3.
slides are in person, which I think me and Matthew can probably speak to that.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you want to just like go to the in person. So I think Paula wanted to sort of start with these questions, and I don't know if we want to like go over them now or go over them at the end after we talk about all of them, because I think they're the same for each type. But just keeping in mind is, how was this implemented? What went as planned, and what might need to be recalibrated for future events. So I'll just start. I mean, this was done through reaching out to the community through different community channels, and even I think one day we actually went out and handed out flyers, and that's how we sort of let people know about the event. And then it was an RSVP event so that we could control the numbers. I think at each event there was anywhere from 3 to 5 people that showed up. I don't know if I can't speak to that, if that's how many we were expecting or if those numbers were lower. But yeah, so I mean, it was good to have sort of these intimate conversations with them and get an understanding of what their thoughts were. So these were the kind of like Pinterest boards, if you want to say, putting stickers for the green on what they liked and the orange for what they didn't like. And we really got a lot of people there that were really attached to the garden and had some sort of connection to the garden. And even if they didn't have a connection to the garden, they saw the garden as something that was good, and that was an asset to the community. I think, what else on here? So yeah, you can just kind of get a sense of what they would like to see developed here. There was also a lot of people had mentioned stuff about job training and workforce development. And I think we had people had mentioned if there was like a coding program. I think someone in the second session mentioned that. And then also job training in relation to like the garden and doing things with that. Is there anything I'm missing on this slide, Matthew?
I think in terms of those 3 questions that came up, I think this part went as planned. I think this one went really, really well. This initial part where we were able to walk through the bigger picture and then let them kind of specifically pick out things that they were interested in or aggressively not interested in seeing on the site, and then being able to pull that thread a little bit and get the motivations behind why they did or did not like those specific elements. I think that worked really, really well. If we're kind of just looking at the bigger picture of how the in-person workshop was set up or what might need to be improved, I think the next step that we kind of moved into where we were actually putting stuff down on the board, I think the people that were there from the community were a little bit hesitant to start putting things down on the board with, and there was an initial hurdle there that they struggled to overcome to be like, let's just start putting things down and see what happens. But once either us as designers or facilitators started putting things down on the board and showing them what we kind of wanted them to do, it became a little bit easier for them to picture things and go a little bit outside the box. But I think initially it was just they were staring at the overhead picture of the plot. Their only thought was we want to keep it a garden, and I think there was an initial resistance to actually putting a built environment on the site, like physically doing it on the board.
So I'm going to jump ahead to kind of talking about then the final results because of that interaction. Can you guys speak a little bit maybe to this sketch?
Yeah, so this was from the first session, and we really kind of went with the Farm on Ogden precedent. I don't know if James is still on, but they loved that. And trying to use that footprint to figure out if we wanted to do some sort of greenhouse / marketplace, if we really wanted to have it build off of the garden, what that footprint would be. And at first they sort of went with this really small footprint because the first session was really attached to the garden, and they kept bringing up the refugees that use the garden and use it to feed their families. So that was a bit of contested area. So that's why you see that this development is on the south side, because the north side of the garden is where the refugee farm is and where they garden. And then you see there's that little area off to the east of the site that's also a vacant lot. And that's where they were primarily saying we should be developing there, whether that be residential or a commercial space. That's where they saw that development happening. I will note that the people in this group and the second group talked a lot about how there's a lot of underutilized space within the area and vacant storefronts and things like that. And so one of their big questions is, why can't we just use those for development and leave the garden? So it took a bit of like explaining this project and process and like what this could sort of be like an economic driver in the area. But I think, yeah, there was a lot of questions about that. And I don't think people really wanted to develop too much on this site, at least in the first group and the second group as well. Okay. I can speak a little bit more to the second group. So
I'll go to the sketch.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. So yeah, this group definitely was a little bit more open to development. They also wanted to build off of the program of the garden and seeing a market space, and even roof gardens, we kind of got through with them that, you know, we can even build our gardens vertical. You can see in the second group that they chose the north end of the site as opposed to the first group because someone was saying that it's better for sun if and for the gardening if the development is on the north end of the site. And so we got community center, some commercial space and market space. I think that is primarily used for the garden. I'm looking back through some of the notes to see if there's anything I'm missing. And Matthew, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, they were definitely keener to develop on the main garden site. They had some interesting ideas for how they could do some additional kind of cleaning and selling of maybe produce that was developed there on that, you know, extra footprint there. But they had also, I think they were the one group in virtual and or in the in-person workshops that actually came out and said straight up, like, we should probably find a place for some parking, and kind of shunted that off to the side parcel. Yeah, the morning session was definitely, there was some very large personalities and people that were very vocal about what they wanted on the site. And I think that definitely drove what ultimately came out of the morning session. The afternoon session was definitely a little bit more collaborative, I think, and people open to maybe some new ways of looking at the site.
I also add that the first session, a lot came up about childcare and like daycare, and having maybe that be tied in with community space or something like that. The woman also noted that she felt that in her network that a lot of women were staying home because of COVID, and there's sort of that financial burden that they're now taking on because they need to provide childcare. So I think maybe some sort of like affordable childcare option or affordable housing was sort of hinted in the first session, but we never really got that much into it because, again, there were some loud personalities that really didn't want to see development on the site.
And then can you guys speak to the last session in the afternoon?
I wasn't in that session. I don't know if anyone else on the call was in the third session, but it looks like they have more development.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like, at least from the first two, I was there for the morning session, and in comparison, just looking at the diagrams from the afternoon, you know, it was kind of a mix. It seems like a mixed bag in terms of where people wanted to develop within the neighborhood. You know, in this last scheme, they're pushing development along the north face. When looking at this sketch, Maddie and Matthew, is this looking from the north to the south?
That's looking north towards Howard Street.
It's taken from the south.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, so the last kind of two sessions of the day were more focused about developing along the street corridor.
I wasn't there for the very late afternoon, that 2 p.m. one, but it does seem like there was that through connection through all of them was that idea of like a community market or someplace that you could transform the actual produce from the gardens or garden farm, whatever term we want to use, into something that actually is like an economic engine a little bit.
Gotcha.
Do we have anyone on who was at that session by chance?
Yeah, I wasn't involved in all of the third session. I was popping in and out, and they really wanted, I think there were two participants in that. They really wanted like smaller shops that could be used, you know, by people in the like local entrepreneurs. So I think that like rent would still be affordable for these people. And that was the main thing that I remember. And they wanted to keep that part on Howard kind of open and inviting.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jane.
Okay, that's interesting. The small kind of incubator space.
Louisa was also on this.
Should we move on to virtual?
Oh, what were we gonna say, Louisa?
Oh,
I'm trying to rack my brain because I'm starting to confuse the different sessions, but
Okay, they can all meld together.
yeah. I think there was some pushback against housing and thinking that there are already several developments of housing in this area, and a concern of making sure it was the right kind of housing, thinking about affordability. And I believe there was interest in program ideas like maker spaces.
Yeah.
Yes, trying to
Seems
blank.
like overall, at least with the in-person, for what I was able to attend, I think the project as a whole, in terms of looking for a program, it's like having specific program, having unique program to the neighborhood, and then maybe sourcing that a little bit more. There was a conversation about taking the opportunity for, you know, this in-person building block workshop, to take it and put it on the actual site. So then you'd get maybe more tenants or people involved in the community garden to come out, instead of having it across the street. So that was something that was kind of touched on at the end of the in-person session. So looking forward, that could be a great opportunity, and hopefully that kind of comes into fruition. In terms of kind of the next topic is then the virtual workshops. For those involved, do you guys kind of want to talk a little bit about how that was orchestrated, and, you know, things that you implemented, and things that went as planned, things that didn't go as planned?
Sure. This is Emma, and I know Ray's on and others that were involved, so feel free to chime in. So the goal for the virtual sessions was to sort of, as much as possible, replicate the in-person experience of the block exercises. Obviously a little bit more tricky. So we actually developed a SketchUp model that we could kind of live move around the pieces with the breakout groups. So I think in general that worked well. I think we had a similar, at least in the session I was in, similar sort of needed a little bit of time for people to get into, like, what am I doing here exactly? And we were trying really hard to not push them in any one direction at the start. We certainly, I think, heard a lot of similar themes of as much of the garden as possible should stay. There's plenty of vacant retail. Why do we need more retail? All that sort of thing. So I feel like the facilitators probably had a bit of a challenging job to kind of respect the opinions, but also push it towards, okay, cool, but a developer's not just going to keep a community garden, like realistically, financially. So I think the tool worked pretty well. I think the one piece, at least in our group, it felt like the time went very quickly. And I don't know if it felt the same way in the in-person, that like more time would have been better, or if there was something about the virtual that just felt a little more like we were like 2/3 into the meat of the discussion when the time was up, at least in my group. But that's just a product of how the conversation was going. One thing we couldn't really do was kind of the image preference thing. So I think it would have been interesting if there was some way to get a bit more at not just use, but kind of the look and feel of the site a little bit more. Yeah, those were kind of my big takeaways. I don't know if others who are in the virtual group have other thoughts as well.
Well, I was in the morning one. I helped lead that session. This is Lisa. And the problem was, since it was morning, there was very few people. I think there was more of us than community participants. Debbie, remind me if that I'm right on that with the count. But the other thing is that the people who were participating, it was 3 people. I think we had 4 or 5 people, and it was like 3 who kind of dominated, and they all sort of had different perspectives, because one of the fellows was a leasing guy. He's like a broker who in the area leases commercial space in a lot of those buildings in the Howard Street corridor. So he had very specific, thoughts. And then there was another guy who was definitely an affordable housing proponent. So he was all about get as many units on there, 100% affordable. Then there was Cindy, who was with the Howard Street Special Service Area. You know, obviously, again, working with existing businesses and trying to figure out how you fill in the gaps. So it was like we kind of had a mix of some professional people who truly work in that commercial district, which was good to get their perspective, but you didn't feel like you were getting residential input per se.
Sure. Well, it's great. I mean, unfortunate within that session, but I think in the spectrum of things, I think it's really important to have, you know, a lot of variety of participants. I think I might be speaking for everyone, but I feel like collectively in a lot of the sessions, the ratio of volunteers to participants was kind of weighted more in the volunteer aspect. So I think, you know, moving forward, just being mindful or flexible about different methods to get people informed about workshops like this. Obviously, like with the pandemic and logistics of gathering, it's complicated, but thinking about other ways to be in touch with people, just as you move forward, something to kind of consider. And then just speaking about like the virtual tools a little bit, Lisa, so how effective was this platform when collaborating during the virtual session versus using kind of working in the SketchUp model?
I mean, obviously with the SketchUp model, you don't have the ability for anyone to put their hand on something and physically move it. So they're totally dependent on our team to do it based on what someone is saying. Sure. And, you know, so I actually don't think it's as effective, even though visually, maybe everyone's getting a better perspective. I don't think it's as effective as when you're in person where someone can actually feel like, no, this is what I mean, and actually go and draw something or move something. So not as interactive, obviously, for the participant.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I like the in-person for that.
Yeah.
A bit more.
Yeah, plus we were
I wish
at
we had
times,
done. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, at times we're being asked to represent multiple ideas at once, and it just became a little convoluted at times.
You couldn't process everything that was being thrown at you at once, James?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely doing some copying of the whole site and then doing one more really fast and then hopping back over, which I'm sure was not perfect for the participants kind of try and wrap their minds around what they were looking at.
And what about this evening group? Can you guys speak a little bit to this session?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
You go. You go.
No, I'll start. I'll echo, I think, most of what I've heard already from the observations from the earlier times. I think one thing well, two things. There was a middle school teacher representing the neighborhood who clearly had a whole classroom full of kids who would be loving the idea of doing what we were doing. And I wonder if that might be an interesting exercise just to see. It'd probably be kids at that age might be more receptive to the things that we were trying to ask them to do. And it might shed some light on how to do it better with adults. But also a lot of the questions that I was fielding were very specific, like there's already that across the street and it's where all the drugs are sold. And so we don't want another basketball court or another garden or another store that'll fail. And I didn't feel like I was armed with the proper tools to, I wanted to say, well, it's not that basketball courts are bad, it's that they haven't been thought through the way they could have been thought through. And so having some visual aids to kind of show people how those things can be planned more effectively and be a help to the neighboring community would have been useful. I struggled with answering those questions on the fly while we were drawing.
Yeah, I think similar to what James is saying, like I feel like some of the discussion tended towards very like complex and difficult questions about like regulation, policy, and like also like the history of the neighborhood, which like I feel like maybe we needed to kind of limit a little bit what the conversation was about, because it sort of ballooned into a lot of like, you know, like people saying, you know, like we need to get this neighborhood like publicly, like owned by the community. We need to like buy up this property and things like that, which, you know, are great ideas, but not really relevant to what we were trying to, you know, provide. So, yeah.
I can just add to that. One of the issues that I felt with this group was that I got the impression, there weren't very many participants, but I got the impression they wanted the answer, most of them wanted the answer to be nothing on this site, but the exercise didn't really allow for that. And so it felt like we kept kind of trying to push them to think about, well, if not nothing, what would you want on the site? Like what could you stretch your imagination to allow for? And then we just got into all of these different complexities of it about like why they couldn't have any, like why they wanted nothing, and it was just not a super productive conversation despite all of our best efforts.
I do want to chime in here that we learned a lot that first session, whether that's in the morning or in the evening, that there were these things that we weren't necessarily planning, and it's very hard to control in a virtual setting because sometimes people just feel like they can say whatever they want to say and not have consequences as if rather than in person. So the first session was definitely slim, and then the evening session there were more people, but then I think we were able to do multiple groups for the evening one.
Group 2.
So yeah, okay, so there were multiple groups. So I guess like if we had prepped better in terms of like being able to answer some of those questions that inevitably came up, then we probably would have done a better job of getting a more finalized SketchUp. But I feel like that came out more in person and then came out later again in the evening session of that Wednesday. But I definitely think that everyone is hitting the nail right here about some of those concerns.
I also just want to acknowledge that there was some organizing going on as far as advocacy for keeping the garden. So that wasn't just happenstance.
Right. Yeah, I could imagine that.
Yeah, I feel like in the same way that we produced these precedents that were really useful in talking about what could happen to the neighborhood, I feel like it could be interesting, like next time, to try to create sort of a more collective picture of what people that might not be able to participate or might choose not to participate like feel about the neighborhood, whether it's like collecting, you know, responses on Twitter or like, you know, finding just
polling
a better background picture, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you could take a lot of the strategies that were maybe implemented in the in-person and then like convert it to digital, right? So it's like maybe you have a couple of images and you send it out and say rank 1 through 5 in terms of your preference of whatever space in this environment, like making it more accessible, but then also making sure that there's precedent, because it seems like at least with a virtual session that was kind of a difficult thing to navigate. Would you say?
We would agree with that. And so we ended up doing 2 surveys via SurveyMonkey, but also in paper form and intercept surveys with partner organizations. And now we've had, the first survey was just like general, what did they even want to see on the site without sketching anything up. And that one has almost nearly 200 respondents.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like 160 or something right now.
And then DIY kits.
Yeah, it exceeded the DIY kits. And then the second survey that we just put out recently was about the visual preferences, which were more of the sticker activity. So that one has right now, I want to say 60 people participated.
We're at over 80 for that right now.
Oh, so sweet, 80. Okay.
We're getting those responses up, which is great.
Yeah, and then those respondents are getting closer and closer to what we want to see, which are more respondents from the north of Howard area. So they're closer in geography than like the people who had participated in some of these workshops.
Great. Well, that's exciting. That's really exciting.
So I just wanted to quickly add, I believe I was in the session that's on the screen right now. This is Kristen. And it was the translation between what was being said and what was being modeled was interesting. And I feel like it was just a bit hard. I can't even imagine what it's like to have to model on the fly, but like we were even kind of sketching things up on here and people in the group were like, that's not what we said. So maybe next time there's more of like a buffer and it's not specifically on the fly, or if there's a way to do it in maybe like multiple variations or something, because I kind of felt like this specific development here, and I think this is the one. If it's not the one, I know the one that I was in, the SketchUp, it felt like very forced and not really reflective fully of what was being said. And then just another side note, I think a huge thing, just being on kind of the receiving end a few of these times of like the way the project is introduced, it's all clear to me because, you know, I'm part of this and I've been following it for weeks and I understand, but I do understand why residents immediately are kind of like, wait, why are you building something here? So maybe it's just being more intentional with the framing of like, hey, this is a city-owned piece of land and someone's going to buy it eventually. And if we can steer what will inevitably happen here in whatever way we possibly can steer it, that's what we're trying to do here. And I feel like in some conversations that was kind of missed. So
yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, stressing the facilitating nature of what we're trying to do and not trying to shape. We're trying to put a form to what they're asking us for, but we're not trying to tell them what's best to do there for their own good. I think that was hard. That was a hard hurdle to get over.
Yeah, as someone who facilitated one of the sessions, like I really I really agree that I wish I'd known a little bit more specifically what sort of information to provide, because there's like so much and there's definitely a hierarchy, and like just having, you know, looked at the project so many times and like talked about it so many times, I think like having a kind of paragraph or like thing of text that we can just control and like uniformly present would be really helpful, because like I also got like bogged down in details and like it was hard, I think, to get everything out in the right way.
For the and sorry, I wasn't able to attend the virtual session. So were they typically run by just one individual or two or three?
No, there was a team of folks. So, and there were also usually staffed with an NPC person. But there would usually be 2 or 3 designers. So one would be working on SketchUp, one would be doing a mural board or sketching or rendering. And then there would be a development finance or more folks who would be crunching the numbers, understanding what people are saying, and then being able to answer some of those finance questions. And then a timekeeper, a note taker, and then the facilitator.
Okay, so yeah, so definitely like an entourage in terms of people they're able to facilitate. So that's interesting that even with that grouping of people.
Yeah, I think it's really more about like equipping everybody with what people would have said. Just because we weren't expecting, well, I guess we were expecting, but we didn't prep well about if people were wanting green space, how do we respond to that? And then how do you respond to if people really want affordable housing and then on the other hand, people don't want that at all, or they don't want commercial, like if we had known that those were going to be issues, I think we would have prepped our facilitators better to be able to kind of like guide people through those questions. But I think that, I mean, everyone is right. It's just like it just depended on the group, and if the dynamic was more gardeners or the dynamic was affordable housing advocates, and like everything would have been swapped.
Right. Like, and I think that's why this conversation is so valuable. We're going to learn so much from these conversations collectively. So then whether we branch out to continue to work virtually or in person, we kind of have this swath of knowledge that we can all now share with one another moving forward.
Is there a scenario from the 8th missing? I thought we had 3 groups.
We do. There's, let's see, another group too.
The DIY group hasn't debriefed
I haven't
yet.
talked to DIY yet.
No, I meant for the 8th.
Kendra, you're right. There was a third virtual group that night because the second group was the one that that we were looking at that picture earlier, and it definitely they talked a lot about boxes and food. I think you and I were in that one. It was like shipping containers, like food trucks and stuff like that. I don't remember there was definitely a third section that night though.
Which is a good reminder point that we need to be collecting this stuff. So we'll try to fill out these slides. I don't think this deck is totally complete. And I think there's going to be, I think the next session is probably going to have a little bit more, maybe we'll go over the slides that weren't quite this one, but yeah, there you are making a valid point. There are things missing. And I think all of these, to Annie's point, the capturing all these lessons learned as well into some piece that is maybe available as one of the resources that City Open has to offer is super valuable. It's really cool to hear these takeaways and the what would you do next time. I'm wondering if we might even want to have a breakout page on that in our document or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so for those of you that, participated in the virtual or in person, or likewise for the DIY kits, if you have in possession documentation from any of those sessions, I'll send out this link as well, or we can even put it in the agenda, but just make sure to contact Paula or Elle and distribute that imagery to them, so then we can continue to compile all this stuff into this deck here. So kind of shifting gears just because it is 7:09, talking about the remote DIY kits. So myself, Anthena, and I'm trying to think who else in terms of final production was, I know Genevieve, you also helped because we made a bunch of them. Anthena, do you want to talk a little bit at all about the kind of initial packaging for the DIY kits?
Sure. So I can just quickly go through this. So the toolkit, as you can see here, has this assembly setup. So you have the page of instructions, you have color-coded foam blocks. As you can see in that photo, there's the paper that shows what the codes stand for, the base map, and all of that is assembled into the envelope and made available at, I believe it was the Alderman's office, and also people could sign up to receive a kit. So I think 50 of these were made, and maybe another 10 after the first 50 were reserved. You can go to the next slide. So the first step was to prioritize what people would like to see on Howard Street. I'm not sure how many people actually filled out this form. So I guess one lesson learned here would be, it would be great if, some designerly folks got together and created a survey application that is good for visual preference. It was very difficult to find something that could be, I guess, relay the type of interaction or create the type of interaction we really wanted folks to have. So we did it through Google Forms. Okay, next slide. And this is really cool. It's just like, sort of like a stopgap video to quickly show people how to use the DIY kit. Annie, do you know who's in this video?
That's me.
It's even better.
My huge watch.
So this was posted on the City Open workshop website, along with the instructions and everything else for completing the exercise. And then this is what we ask people to do. Basically two things: report back with a picture of what they created and provide a little narrative, and submit through the Google form. And there were other ways to submit as well, like email, etc. So I believe we have an example of what that submission looks like. I think we have one or two that came into the Google form. So as you can see, all of the sentiments that we have been discussing have been visually represented here by, I believe this is, yeah, Dan Mendelson. So a lot of green space, very sparse on the actual building space that is on the site. And I think this has been thoroughly discussed, like what the contention points are, what people are actually visualizing. I'd also like to just add that it could be just a very stressful time for folks and they don't want something else to really think about right now. So hearing about the responses to the survey and the visual preferences that went out via survey as well sort of communicates to us that people may have opinions, they want to be involved, but it may have to be multiple brief touches and not something that is requiring what would be considered deep thought outside of an unfacilitated space.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So in total, we've received about eight or nine total submissions for the do-it-yourself kits. There's been about 10 that are kind of in limbo because they were supposed to go to an organization and then the organization decided this week that they weren't able to participate. So we have a couple kits that are sitting in the board office being unused. But nonetheless, there's about, I guess, like 10% have come back.
That's great. I think Paul wanted me to play this video if it'll work. So something else that could be interesting to like send out, whether we continue to show this with some type of imagery, but just kind of walking people through the simplicity of putting the blocks together. I think what's kind of fun about these is, unlike the virtual, it gives people an opportunity to actually build at home. Even with the in-person, I think until I remember in the first session, I actually had to like grab a block so people could realize like, oh, we can start to like think through these things. I think what's great about the DIY is people can actually be hands-on with this and they can kind of, you know, at their own pace, assemble these things. And, you know, even with like this quick example, just to think about, okay, so if development has to happen, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be one large volume, but a series of volumes scattered along the site with this kind of green network woven in between them. So that I think could be kind of a fun thing to do, is whether we, you know, moving forward with like the instructions or maybe show like a series of like precedent images. Cause again, I think people need kind of visual cues to get those thoughts flowing, just to make sure to include those in the DIY kit as well. I love the idea of like a video, but maybe again, like posting the video on social media, you know, and then posting like, make sure to pick up your DIY kit, you know, just kind of layering in the multimedia communication styles and methods that we've been doing in all of these sessions.
I would really love to get like feedback from someone who's not a designer, who's used one of these kits, and understand what their challenges and obstacles are, or like what they liked about it, because I'm looking at it right now and trying to put myself in that thing, and it is pretty abstract, and I'm wondering if there's enough communication of that abstraction happening. Mm-hmm. So that, I wonder if that feedback might be, do you have tracings of who has kits and if anyone would be open for feedback? But because the one review that we had, or the slide that was shown before this, I think that was from an architect, right? Or submitted by an architect.
Yeah, that's correct. So the earliest one was done by an architect, but then there's been more that have been not. That includes the one before it, where it's like mostly green. So because I think some of them have participated in other conversations that they feel like, this guy emailed me and said like, you know, he feels strongly that the green space should be retained, but there could be some development on, so that's why there's like these blocks on the other side. but he doesn't know how to like put it in a form that makes like, or, like doesn't know how to put it in a shape that makes sense. But he's just like, this, it should go over here somewhere, you know? So
Right.
I think it's still intuitive, but it's not as intuitive as if you were a designer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can get some. We're still having a drop-in session tomorrow, so I think we can get some feedback from.
Yeah,
that's good to know.
Hopefully.
Like there's office. How have there been previous office hours, and if so, how did they go?
Nope, this is our first one. This is our first time doing a DIY thing anyway. So I sent emails to everyone that received a kit. So there could be people that sign up, or well, registration wasn't mandatory, so we don't really know who might come. But we pitched it as optional. So if people wanted to do it, I think there were like 2 people who said they had expressed some interest. But I guess there's a couple of folks who are standby volunteers are volunteering tomorrow. But it's 5 to 6 tomorrow.
Great. Well, keep us posted on how that goes. I'll be really interested.
Yeah.
Can we also share that video with folks who got the kit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Here, let me
pretty cool video.
It's also on the City Open Instagram, but we can share the link too.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the. From there, I'm not sure how to give you the video, so I'm just gonna put in the link and. Or here, I'll send it to you, Kendra.
Is the office hours tomorrow set up to be a one-on-one kind of thing, or is it?
No, but we can do that. We can do small breakout rooms if there are multiple people and then there's enough designers to work, quote unquote, one-on-one. But in the event that there's going to be not enough participants, then everyone could just be in a big group, but then we might not need all the volunteers.
Got it. Okay.
Debbie, do you want to make ask questions about how people have reacted to, like, just to have a little ice moment?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Do you want?
Guys, I'm looking for a mute button and I cannot find it. There it is.
Do you want us to ask maybe like an icebreaker question just to get people's reactions to the kit and how they felt about it or how they worked with it, just to get a sense of what's going on and like sort of.
Oh, you mean like for tomorrow?
Yeah, with the
Yeah. So some of the questions that I had posed in the email is like, how's it going? Do you need any help? Has it been challenging? Like things that are more like emotionally tied to the do-it-yourself kit. And I feel like those questions should be relevant for tomorrow's conversation as well if they join. I can come up with a set of questions if that's helpful for some of the facilitators if that helps.
I think it would just be useful to see the questions that were included in the email to the participants so that we can continue to build on that conversation.
Sure, I can do that.
No extra work.
Just trying to see. So I'm going back up to this calendar. Yeah, so I guess moving forward, things to think about, if you have any existing documentation or imagery models, whatever you think will be helpful, make sure to give that to the point person for whether it's the virtual group, DIY, or in person, just so we can continue to kind of build this deck. And then, because we do want to compile all this information to the kind of next phase, which starting in November will be more documentation. It sounds like, especially with the DIY kits, hopefully tomorrow you will have a very active level of involvement with the office hours, but that will kind of create a more robust series of documentation opportunity for that group. Trying to think of anything else. Genevieve, what else can you think of in terms of kind of next steps?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to step away for a second and miss what you're talking about. I literally just came back in. Next, are we at next steps?
Yeah. So in terms of kind of transitioning,
Right.
and yeah,
You guys
no.
hear me?
Mm-hmm. You pull back to the. I was going to say, because I mean, we are winding down in terms of the season. It doesn't mean there's still not time left, but yeah, it's kind of amazing how quickly this season has gone by. I don't know if anyone else has felt like it's just flown by.
So you may have already said this, but I think like there's now this big like rush for collecting anything and everything that you haven't already uploaded to the City Open Google Drive. I know, like, for example, photos. I'm not sure. I haven't actually.
Oh yes, that's a good
on
point.
the photo collection, but it's one of those things that we all take them and then you don't upload. So if anyone has questions about like how to do that, I think maybe sending an email directly to like this, just the City Open thing, and we can send out a link to that, because I know the links in the chat get lost. But collecting anything you have is really important before everyone disperses, because I mean, we have everyone's emails and stuff like that, but that feels big. Actually, one thing, minor tiny request, if you're able to, totally understand if you're not, but I was supposed to grab a screenshot of everyone's faces, and there's really just me and Annie and Al and Matt showing our faces. So if you're able to turn your camera on for like 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, that'd be fantastic. And if not, totally understand, because yeah, I don't use a camera at work, and I know what it's like too. Awesome. There's some faces popping up. But it'll be like a super dark thing. Everyone's lighting is, it's night. But yeah, I mean, we're almost at time, and thank you guys for.
I was gonna say one last thing too. The social. For those of you that would be able to do a social, whether in person or not, or a fun virtual social, if you have any ideas, let us know. I know actually at my office, we're thinking about doing a murder mystery party for, we typically do like a big Thanksgiving dinner, but since we won't be in the office, we're doing like a turkey murder mystery. Anyway, but if there's something virtual in terms of an activity that could be fun to do socially, as fun as it can be to socialize virtually, let us know. Or if you have any ideas in terms of safe outdoor spacing, keep us posted.
Sounds like we need to play the game that everyone is playing. With the
what is that?
AOC played it recently. I don't remember what it's called.
Yes.
Among Us.
Among Us. Yes, that's the one.
Okay. I've played Psych is a virtual game that I've played, and then a Trivia also is another good one. But Among Us, okay.
I mean, if AOC did it, I definitely want to check it out.
Okay. Were you able to take the photo? I think you have to stop sharing the screen for it to go full screen.
Oh, I was just snapping them, but
oh, we're doing a dual. I'm sharing and Genevieve's taking the photo.
But actually, since we have, I mean, if people want to like smile, so I don't have like, because when you just do them candidly. So ready, set, 1, 2, 3, go. Yay, cool. That's a lot of faces. I feel really good about that. Thanks, guys. So I think we can let y'all get on with your evenings, but thank you so much. And oh, hey, kids. We'll talk to you later, right? Okay. Next week?
Yes.
Are there any final words? I don't want to like cut anyone off.
No, just that we are so thankful for this partnership and for everyone's hard work throughout this whole month. So thank you so much.
Of course, it's been a great experience.
It's been really, really awesome. I feel very privileged to be able to be a part of it, and I'm so grateful for Al and Paola for getting this going, and MPC for reaching out. It's really cool. So I feel like awesome opportunities all around, and also really cool to like meet all of you, even virtually. But like, there's a lot of talent on this crew here. So, okay.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks.